Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be talking mostly about Shadowlands and what the Shadowlands squish could look like. This was brought up to me from our Discord, which I was able to trace back to a screenshot of what looks like, if you go to the Armory, a couple different raids that are actually squished on the Armory of a variety of our characters to a different level than the level is expected. The most obvious one is the Legion, and you can actually go test it in your Armory right now. Check your character to see if you get the same thing. But it says that some of the Legion raids, basically all but the newest one that came out, the last raid of Legion and Taurus, all of them are scaled to level 35. Someone pointed out that this could maybe have a connection to Shadowlands and how they might do the level squish, and maybe what level some of the dungeons will be squished to once we're at level 50 or 60, so we can go back and solo them. So I wanted to discuss this a little bit further. I decided to look more into this. We did this on livestream, and a couple things that the chat pointed out to me. First, the Firelands raid in the Cataclysm section of your character's raiding history. The Firelands raid, and only Firelands out of Dragon Soul, Blackwing Descent, Barden Hold, Bastion Twilight, Throne of Four Winds, is level 25, while the other raids are appropriate level, which is 85. Going back one more expansion into Wrath of the Lich King, Ulduar is level 20, while the rest of the Lich King expansion is level 80. And then going one further back to Burning Crusade, Black Temple is level 20, while everything else is level 70. The easiest explanation when looking at this pattern is because Black Temple is actually on our list of some of the raids we can do as max level characters through time walking. So Black Temple is a time walkable raid, so is Ulduar, and so is Firelands. So I guess it will explain why these raids in particular do have their levels kind of squished. And maybe that's how Blizzard actually does level squishes. Although I've never paid attention to this screen, maybe this has been there since every one of those raids was added to time walking. But I believe that this is how it works. Blizzard squishes our characters, and then they have to squish the content of that dungeon to another level to account for the squish that our characters have. So when it squishes our abilities, it squishes all our damage, our item level, then it maybe makes our characters a bit too weak for the original raid. So Blizzard has to squish the raid enough to make it match to, I guess, our item levels, our abilities, our gear, so we can at least experience this content in a somewhat realistic way, where mechanics will actually be a mechanic that you have to follow rather than ignore, but where nothing will really feel like it's one-shotting you and feel more appropriate. Maybe this number isn't arbitrary and it doesn't have to do anything with time walking, but because it has Firelands, Ulduar, as well as Black Temple, I would think that all this has to do with time walking, but that's just a guess. Another thing that it could be is Blizzard messing around with some of the raids that have been squished before, and they're kind of messing in the background with some of the Legion content, which is some of the newer stuff, trying to figure out the proper number that content should be at once our characters go through the Shadowlands level squish, and are using them as kind of like a petri dish to test. And maybe it's happening in the background, but somehow got leaked to the WoW Armory. Of course, it also could be that Blizzard decided to just randomly change the levels of a bunch of different raids in your character's history, something that nobody would go back to look at just to get this hype circulating, and here come the videos on the level squish and this new possibilities. But this got me thinking, Blizzard has been really investing a lot of time into the level squishes in terms of time walking and trying to allow players to be able to scale their characters to the level of the friends with party sync, which will disable certain abilities, and it actually does work. I even ran on my rogue, max level rogue, Deadmines dungeon, and yeah, there's a little bit of tomfoolery of me having max level gear being squished, and then the mage running around with heirlooms, of course, buffing him a little bit, so there's going to be a little bit weirdness to the abilities. But if my rogue, let's say, had all of my abilities unlocked, like being able to blade flurry, being able to at least provide other benefits and gain all the extra passes that come from certain of my abilities unlocked, and the full access of talents, I would actually have a more or less competitive time DPSing, because right now I'm just literally just stuck to single target and I don't have all the different passives and my stats are kind of locked. But what if Blizzard were to kind of unlock it, unshackle it? And in a sense, what if that is how they did the level squish for Shadowlands? Blizzard invested a lot of time into these scaling properties. So what if that's exactly what's going to happen in Shadowlands? Instead of going and redesigning the math behind our characters, very similar to how they did the item level squish in the past and the number squish for Battle for Azeroth, for example, or how they try to do that again back in Warlords of Draenor. They really tried to squish everything together, at least with numbers, and I think they were only somewhat successful because the numbers came back to basically whatever Mr. Pandaria had very quickly into WoD. But I feel that they've been playing with this kind of scaling system for a while because they knew that eventually, you know, past level 120, what are we going to do? Climb to level 130, 140, 150, 200, 250, 1,000. So eventually the game, you know, we got to go up and up and up and up and up. So you will want to do that big reset. And will it work out? A lot of it is written in spaghetti code. Blizzard has been trying to figure out ways to fix it. But if you notice with some of the recent patches, like for example, when they changed the auction house, that's a lot of code they had to take out of the original auction house and add new stuff in. And it caused a lot of issues. People's gold being kind of kept away from them when they bought stuff, them not getting the items they needed, auction house even crashing the game and causing people to get DC'd. Hell, for the longest time, Blizzard couldn't even find a way to expand the original bag to make it bigger. Because if you were to change anything with that bag, the rest of the game would collapse. And this has been known by the community for a bit. The fact that they're able to go back into the game and fix up parts of the code to make sure that it's all stable is great. But I don't really know how much more they'll want to do when it comes to a massive endeavor like a level squish. But what if the easier solution, and this is what really got me thinking for this video, is to do like a time walking scaling for all our characters. Of course, Blizzard is going to redesign how characters play a little bit for Shadowlands, and there's going to be abilities mostly coming back rather than complete redos for certain playstyles, although I feel there is going to be a couple specs that are just feel terrible to play. I feel like Blizzard is going to go and redo some here and there in massive, drastic ways. But for the most part, they just want to give back the toolkit and try to kind of explore on the bare bones classes we have right now to try to add complexity from here on out. And that's a lot to endure when it comes to Shadowlands in terms of the amount of work that's going to come in. So I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard decided for the level squish to use the scaling technology they've been so hard at work on, really trying to perfect it or get it really close to try to see if they can make this happen. I believe that Battle for Azeroth, when they scaled the numbers, it wasn't something that had to go into the backlines of the code, the very, very dark depths of the game and really kind of reconstruct the math all from the bottom up. Instead, I really think that in BFA, they decided to do, for the most part, a scaling squish for our damage. Because I remember at the beginning of BFA and throughout the expansion, there were a couple items that were, let's say, low level, especially in the beta for Battle for Azeroth, that did absurd amount of damage. Certain trinkets, certain weapons with an effect, and for some reason those abilities said they did low damage, but when applied to your character, it did absurdly high amounts of damage, and Blizzard had to go and fix them. Some of the things that I can remember, I think there was a fist weapon from, I believe it was Sunken Temple or one of those other dungeons from Vanilla, but it had a damage over time effect. Then there was a Wrath of the Lich King fist weapon that has a chance to give your auto attacks extra shadow damage from Wrath. I don't remember this weapon being insanely good, but if you put on your offhand, it wasn't that much of a damage loss. And essentially could use it in PvP against warriors and death knights and would go through the armor and hit the health a lot easier, but I never really get to abuse it hard. Hell, I mean, the Gas trinket was for some reason working with your Blade Flurry. If you pop Blade Flurry and use the Gas trinket, it counted as an attack for you because it does all physical damage. So a lot of rogues were using that recently, kind of crazy. But every one of those weird things, Blizzard did go and nip in the bud, and it never really became that much of an issue. And I'm talking to you about those things because most of you guys probably never even heard about these things. So I still do wonder if they will do the level squish in the same way that they do time walking, because it kind of works. If any of you remember the old classic Alterac Valley event when they had, I played it on a couple characters and it felt quite good. A lot of characters really did feel pretty okay to play, nobody felt busted good, so I wonder if this is the technology that Blizzard will use forward into Shadowlands. This technology of course will have weird issues with it because you're looking at scaling, not fixing or writing things bare bones. But I wonder if that's something Blizzard will implement. So I guess I'm just gonna pass it off to you guys. Do you guys think Blizzard will utilize time walking level squish? What do you think about the change to some of the levels for some of the raids? And let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you in another video.